Hey guys, it's Counting in my review for Bloodshot. So what Bloodshot is essentially about is we center on the character of Ray Garrison. He is this former Marine and things like that, and basically one day his wife and him, they are both tragically murdered by this terrorist of sorts, and the next thing that happens is he wakes up one day in this lab. He's been brought to this center that has rehabilitated him and seemingly brought him back to life and turned him into this superhuman of sorts, and he doesn't really know what's going on, and basically, he now has to do what he can, but also is determined to track down the killer of him and his wife and exact revenge, but also try to learn more about his powers, and that's really all I'm going to say, because I am not Sony, who gave away 90% of this movie. Bloodshot, what a weird film to talk about right now because, normally this would be the big new release, but it really is the last big blockbuster for a while, and it really does suck because this was one that I was really dreading. This just looks so cheesy and stupid to me, and it just seemed like one of those movies that is like Hellboy last year, where it seems like it's the kind of superhero movie that we as a industry are above, that we are above these kind of movies. We're not going to see them anymore because why would we? Why would we want to see these kind of movies? But for some reason, they're still out there, and it very much seemed like it was going to be something that was really stupid, something that feels like it belongs to 2000s, and yeah, it sucks. Bloodshot is absolute trash. I really hate this movie quite a bit. It is one of the dumbest and probably most idiotic of its kind in a very long time, but we're just getting to right now. So I think right off the bat, one of the biggest issues with this movie is without a doubt the cast here. And look, there are a lot of really talented actors in this movie for sure. There's a lot of actors that I really do respect. The problem is the majority of this cast just is not very good at all. The biggest of them easily being Vin Diesel, who, look, I've said it before, Vin Diesel's a very likable guy. He's very charismatic as a person. He's someone that's very easy to latch onto. But when it comes to a role like this that deserves a lot, that, basically, it needs to have a lot of emotional complexity. It needs to have a lot of layers to it. You need to be able to convey what exactly Garrison is going through. Diesel is absolutely the wrong choice here. He is horribly miscasted in this role, and he's also really bad in this movie as a result. And it's not so much that he's bored. Like, I didn't really get the sense that Diesel was bored. To me, I don't think he's an actor that is at a point in his career when he can carry this kind of material. Diesel can carry a movie, but not one like this. He needs to play more characters like, say, Dominic Toretto, or even, I would say, voice acting, because he's proven before that he can be a very good voice actor. But when you give him a role like this, that's requiring a lot of, emotion out of him and a lot of depth, it comes across very awkward, and it's very hard to watch at points. It's very hard to take him seriously. You don't buy any of what this character is going through. You don't buy the trauma that he's had, and Diesel just does not do a good job here. It was just, again, there are a lot of things wrong with this movie, and I do think that this is a film that really could have been elevated by a really good lead performance, but sadly, Diesel was just never the right choice. It really sinks the whole thing down, I have to say. It's his lack of, not charisma, because he does have it, but it's his lack of emotion, his lack of, talent that really does sink this entire film down. He's just not as he just doesn't have the capability to really pull this off, and as a result, the film itself just really goes downhill because of it. The rest of the cast also, unfortunately, just does not really do a lot to stick out here very much either. Guy Pearce, he's playing the typical corporate sort of guy who, you know, he seems like he's good, but he has very sinister intent behind what he's doing. And we've seen this character 1,000 times before. Pearce doesn't really bring that much to the table. He doesn't really have a lot to work with, unfortunately. And Pearce is a great actor, but I'm going to say what a lot of people have said. This is very reminiscent of his character in Iron Man 3, but at least that character that I actually don't mind. Like, I don't dislike that character like everyone else does. We were, and it's mainly because we were actually given time to get to know that character. Not at all the case with Pearce's character in this movie. It just did not work at all here. Sam Heughan is another actor that I really do like a lot, but he is really bad in this movie as well. Just trying to play this, like, hard edge, like, you know, person that's in this facility who is basically just trying to rein in Garrison when he goes too far, and he just never really works here. Toby Kebbell's really bad in this film. Just a lot of the actors here are really bad. Lamone Morris, oh my god, I have never hated Lamone Morris really in anything. He is fucking terrible here. He's trying so hard to play, like, say, a Michael Pena, one of those sidekick type roles, like a Jacob Batalon or something like that, and it just never really works at all. I was not at all into what he was doing. I found him so obnoxious in this role. He's just the tech guy. That's all he is. He's the geeky tech guy that is just so smart in that way, and he loves to be quippy, and I couldn't stand him at all. He was so annoying in this movie, and every time he came on, the film was already really bad, but whenever he came on, just made things so much worse. And unfortunately, the same also goes for another actor that I really do love in Siddharth Dhanje. He played the love interest in Undone. Really loved him in that, but here, he's similar to Morris, just playing this really nerdy and just obnoxious tech that I really couldn't stand at all. He was really hard to watch in this movie. Just a lot of really bad acting in this movie. There is one good performance, though, and that is from Eiza González. She almost saves this movie. Almost saves it. It's because González is a very talented actress. Any scene that she's in is not nearly as bad because of her. She does do a really good job in this movie at conveying the relationship that KT does form with Garrison, the way that she's been forced into this situation. González does a really solid job of that, especially where a character goes in the third act. She really does do a good job of elevating this character. It's kind of like what I wish Vin Diesel could have done, where he took a character that's very one-note and actually gave him more layers. That's what González really does here. She's out-acting everyone in this movie. Every scene that she's in, she's out-acting them, and it makes me upset that she's in this movie, because she's way too good for something like this, and I really love what she did here. But other than that, everyone else is just absolute trash in this movie, and I really couldn't stand the acting here. Getting into the directing here, though, again, it really leads to one of my biggest problems with this movie, and that is that, and I hate saying this because I know a lot of people have said this about many other films before, but this really feels like one of those films that is trying so hard to, like, set up a cinematic universe and is trying to replicate the Marvel formula, and it's failing miserably. I do get the sense that David S.F. Wilson is a fan of this character, that he is a fan of comics, but I definitely also get the sense that he is a first-time director, because oh my god, it really shows here. He has no idea what he wants this movie to be. There are points where it's trying to be really silly and just very quippy in that way and be just like a, regular comic book film. And then he tries to make it a lot darker and more complex and something almost reminiscent of like Westworld or something like that. And it just never really works at all. His style is just very unclear as to what he wants it to be. It's very clear to me that he just does not have a grip on what he really wants in this film, and it just never really works works in that way. It's very hard to watch at points, honestly, because the film is all over the place in terms of tone. The comedic moments feel incredibly forced and just never really work, and then the dramatic moments are at times almost laughable because of the fact that, again, it doesn't at all feel earned, and there's not that nice blend that you really need. I feel like with a much better director, this could have actually been somewhat decent, but because the fact that Wilson is so inexperienced as a director, you really get the sense that he had no idea what he wanted to do here. And again, the film really does suffer because of it. But easily the biggest problem with this movie, besides Vin Diesel's casting, because that is the obvious one, is the writing here, which, holy shit, where do I even begin? Right off the bat, guys, I have to say, I mean, this is a Sony film, so this is to be expected. But I have not seen a movie in so long that spoils almost every single thing that happens in its trailer. The actual plot of this movie is something that you guys should not know. All the simulation stuff and things like that, that is all stuff that happens at like the hour mark of this movie. It takes literally an hour for all of that stuff to go down. It takes an hour for us to get to any of that stuff. And because of the fact that most people who saw this movie, I'm assuming, saw the trailer, you're going to be bored out of your skull because they set up this mystery throughout of like what's going on, but you already know like what's happening. I myself was very confused. I thought the trailer was like misleading or something like that, but that's not the case. They take a long time to reveal this mystery, and it's just not presented well at all. And because of that, the way they set it up also just does not make any sense. The way it goes, they just do it in the most boring way possible, and I don't think they did a very good job with this writing. But also, when it just comes to the logic of it all, I mean, I think my biggest issue with this movie is that very little of it really makes any goddamn sense whatsoever. If you really think about it, nothing that's really happening makes sense. How have they gotten this tech? How has Guy Pearce done this? How does this really work? What is he gaining from doing this? How is he doing this to someone like Ray Garrison, who was a real person? How is he doing this to them? How is Garrison falling for this whole thing? How are they doing what they're doing to him? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and it's very frustrating in that way. It's something that, again, if you just think about it for too long, your head's gonna hurt just because of how ridiculous and nonsensical so much of this movie is. But also, considering this is supposed to be an origin story, I have to say very little of it actually focuses on the lead character. There are so many long stretches of the movie that is instead devoting time to Lamone Morris goofing off and talking about like Tinder dates and things like that, or Eiza González trying to tell Guy Pearce like he should not be doing what he's doing, or Sam Heughan's character trying to, ring in Garrison and things like that, and they're like competing with Lamone Morris, and just, there's so much going on in this movie, but our lead character is such a bore. There's almost nothing to him except for the fact that he's kind of an idiot. He is very gullible into what's going on, and you're just kind of, and because of that, there's very little going on there. You're just kind of waiting for him to realize it all. You're waiting for him to finally get to the bottom of things. And once he does, the movie's almost over. So there's very little care put into him. And again, that's something where, like I said, Diesel could have added something to this character, but because he didn't, the character is just such a bore in that way. And considering the whole movie is about that character, it really doesn't work when they do that, and I don't think they did a good job at all. And I have to say, one of the things I was dreading the most of this movie is who's writing it, because Jeff Wadlow is one of the writers. And I will say, does he do like a crazy twist here? No, but that's because you've already seen it in the trailer. Like I said, the whole simulation thing, that's the twist to this movie. That's supposed to be the big reveal, but we already knew that's what was going on. So it's just like, what the fuck? Like, you would think that Sony has learned this by now, but honestly, it seems like they never will. They're always going to release movies that reveal like half of what's going on, and it just doesn't ever work. And again, it just results for a very uninteresting story. The story here is so stupid and it just doesn't make any sense at all. And again, there are moments where it tries to be a lot more complex and deeper than it is, and it just doesn't really work. There was potentially a good story in there, I think, not just with our main character, but also with Eiza González's character. I did find myself kind of almost latching onto her character, but it was mainly because of González's performance, because KT as a character, they're just, and yes, that's literally her name, it's not Katie, it's KT. They want to make that very clear that her name is KT. You can see that they just have no idea what to do with her other than she is the good-natured sort of Mary Sue of this movie, who is a badass for sure. She's definitely a badass, but she always does the right thing and things like that. And again, there's not much going on there really at all, other than this weird sort of, device that she has that Pearce is constantly controlling, because she has this like ICD throughout the movie, and there could have been an interesting story there, but again, you can tell it's Jeff Wadlow writing it, because every single thing in this movie is spelled out to you like you're an idiot, like you don't understand what's going on, when it's such a simple story. Again, not a lot of it makes sense, but it's really not that hard to understand a lot of what's going on in this movie, but clearly they think that's the case, and it just doesn't work at all. It also has some of the worst humor that I have seen in one of these kinds of films in a very long time. Like I said, everything about Lamone Morris's character, they're trying so hard to make him like the goofy little sidekick, and it's just not working at all. And the dialogue in this movie is so awful. There's so many lines that just do not work here, and so many scenes where I'm watching. One with Toby Kebbell in the beginning especially, I have no idea how that was approved. I literally have no idea how that was approved, and I don't care that they like reference it later in the movie of how stupid it was. I don't know how they looked at that scene and thought, oh, that's a great idea, let's keep it in there. It legitimately felt like something that would be in the parody version of this movie. It did not feel like it should actually be here, and that's what I'm talking about when the movie just is trying so hard to be like a Marvel movie or something like that. Those were the kind of scenes that I think of, and it just did not work here at all. The screenplay is just an absolute disaster. There's so many things that just do not work here, and it's easily one of the worst thing about this movie. But oh my god, the cinematography as well is so fucking cheap in this movie. The whole movie looks like something that would be on like, it's a combination of like a really bad early 2000s film and something that would be on the Sci-Fi Channel. There's not a single scene in this movie involving the sort of powers that Garrison has that feels real, that feels tangible. Everything feels so VFX in that way. Every effect looks like an effect. Every single thing that looks fake looks so fake. There's one scene you see in the trailer. It's with Guy Pearce and Diesel, and they're in this like they're in this like setting. It legitimately looked like a green screen. It did not look real at all. And the action scenes as well are so phony. And there's also this huge over-reliance on slow-mo. And again, it's one of those movies where it really feels like it's trapped in the early 2000s. It has all the makings of one like that. And it's just not working at all. That elevator fight in question is so laughable. I can see a lot of people laughing at it. I was just cringing in horror. Like, I was like, I don't know what I'm watching right now. Like, it was not working at all for me. And just the slow-mo itself is so tiring after a while. And there isn't really a single action scene in this movie that I can say that really stuck out. They all just felt so cheap. They all just felt so half-assed and just didn't really work at all. And again, Bloodshot could be a really interesting character, but the film does not utilize him very much at all, because everything just looks so fake and phony, and it takes you out of it immediately. I think just looking at one shot of this movie in general, it's gonna take you out of it, and it just doesn't work here. The score is fine, I guess, not really much to say about that. And the editing, the movie isn't even 2 hours long, but it is such a drag to get through. especially like I said, leading up to what we already know. It's really slow, it's really boring in that way, and it's one of those films where I can definitely see people being very uninterested. I don't think there's a lot here to really keep you entertained. So yeah, Bloodshot is pretty much what I expected. It's a very ridiculous and idiotic film that really doesn't make much sense at all. It's got a very phoned in and very just it's got a very cheesy and unconvincing performance from Vin Diesel, who's so terribly miscasted in this movie. It has some ideas that I do think could have worked, but it's bogged down by such a ridiculous and almost juvenile script that really sinks the entire movie. It does a terrible job of introducing this character. It's trying so hard to be like an MCU or other superhero films that has no identity of its own. And just in general, I think out of all the movies that could have come out before this coronavirus just takes a hit and completely halts any sort, screeches any sort of films that are coming out from now to like May to a halt. This is like the worst film to release as like the last major release for a while, because oh my god, this is such a disaster on almost all fronts, and I'm definitely going to give Bloodshot overall a D. But overall, guys, in my review of Bloodshot, let me know what you guys saw this movie overall. Lift your thoughts in it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.